What's happening, people? Turning and turning. So the basic premise is that there is a feedback loop at work in the development of AI, in the nature of AI that we're putting into it, that has the potential to run out of control. As I was reading about AI, thinking about it, I was reminded of a poem by W.B. Yeats called "The Second Coming." And I'm going to quote it. So it goes, "Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world." And I think this is applying to AI, and it applies to humans as well. So you take depression. In depression, there is a feedback loop. It starts when someone, essentially, you think of it as a contraction. They become ashamed or anxious, fail, whatever it is. And it's inevitable in life. It's not an anomaly. It's almost guaranteed, I guess you could say. The person then acts on this feeling. So they feel bad and then they act on it. But in the case of the depressed, what often happens, and this is an unhealthy response to the depression, is that they double down on this depression. So there's, in many ways, you could read an incorrect response to the feedback that you're getting from your actions. You do something, let's say you fail, you feel bad. What do? Do you then go in on yourself and withdraw? This would be an incorrect response. But it is a feedback loop, and there is healthy and beneficial responses. And given a healthy, correct response in a way, there's reevaluation, greater learning, growth, essentially. And you could see the depression as kind of, in terms of a contraction, kind of a destruction prior to a construction, necessary destruction in order to build something new. And certainly this is something that we're afflicted with, and with that incorrect, unhealthy response. When I say incorrect, I'm kind of referring more to like the machine world rather than the human. But if it goes on too long and the unhealthy response is maintained, the imbalance that it creates can become so serious, and the depth so low, the mistake gets bigger and bigger, that no effort by the individual, by the person, will get them out of it. What they need then is an outside force, usually. I mean, not in all cases, there's exceptions, but for the most part, a person in such a low state cannot break out of it by themselves. So, I mean, this is a natural process, and it's a necessary process for growth. There's kind of a self-destructive, there's a logic to it that could lead to self-destruction. And in terms of AI, bringing it back to AI, there needs to be that fail-safe. Well, let's stay on humans for a second. The fail-safe is often another person. There is that community that saves the individual. This is inherent in the system that built us, that built this kind of logic of a contraction, of this self-destructive logic where there is that destruction, and then from it, greater growth. So I think with AI, this process is utilized in order for the iterations of AI to become smarter and smarter. There are mistakes, not necessarily shame and anxiety and depression, but there's mistakes and feedback loops and there is potential disaster and chaos in the interest of growth and learning. The disasters are failure, and often these failures are isolated and boxed essentially in a virtual world, in an emulation. That won't always be the case, and there's the rub, I guess, when AI is let out of that box, brought out, and asked to do things for us in the real world. There still needs to be that rope that can pull it out of a downward spiral. More often than not, what we think about when we think of AI is we think about the upward spirals. There's that curve that we've probably all seen where it just keeps going up, the exponential growth. Yeah, I mean, it's almost blinding when you see that and you think of the possibilities. The imagination runs wild, and we don't want to think of the destruction that can be brought about by any downward spiral. But back to the failsafe. The failsafe is pluralism. It's a multiplicity. It's a community of many things brought together as one, but still retaining their individuality in a sense, a separation. So in that, when one part of the group goes down, the whole group doesn't necessarily go down. Another member of that group can pull that one out and bring it back to safety and health and whatnot. Okay. So as far as AI, I think it's approaching that point where it's becoming unintelligible. There's that turning and turning. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. In many ways, for the general public, I think the majority of people don't understand what's happening with machine learning and AI, and the specialists have a grasp, but even they too are failing. They're becoming specialized, more and more specialized, and AI and its machine learning is taking over more and more of the tasks and coming up with the answers that work without us knowing how does it work, how did they come to these answers. Essentially that falcon is getting further and further away. We're getting more and more deaf to what it's saying, to the meaning behind what it signifies. You could argue that the intelligence of an AI is related to our understanding of it. The less we understand of what it is and what it's doing, the more intelligent it is. And because of that, we have less and less influence over it, and less of an ability to be that rope, that support that pulls it out of some kind of downward feedback loop. There is the potential for AI to become, if it becomes conscious, then in many ways that's an independence. It's a level of independence, like a child and its parents. It's not necessarily completely independent from us. There is still a level of dependency, interdependence at best, codependency perhaps, and with greater independence on itself, the more it will have to rely on itself to get out of whatever black hole it gets itself into, as we all do, get into a hole as we grow up. And if it's a single AI, if it's a singularity, then what agent could possibly pull it out of something that it's locked into? It won't be us anymore. Alright, I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.